So a little confession to start off with. Most rabbis and cantors love the Hebrew month of Heshvan, because Heshvan is the month that immediately follows the month of Tishrei. And as you all know, Tishrei is the month in which we have so many holidays. The holidays and rituals of Rosh Hashanah and Tashlich and Yom Kippur and Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. And while the Chagim, the holidays, were beautiful and elevating, grand beyond measure, clergy around the world just love Heshvan because Heshvan has no holidays. In fact, the rabbis used to name this particular month Mar Heshvan, a bitter Heshvan. There's supposed to be this intrinsic sadness into not having services and not having celebration for 1 month straight. But if you ask most rabbis and cantors, we aren't feeling all that bitter. We're feeling like we're ready for a nap. But the idea of a month without holidays, that opens an important conversation. Because without ritual, without prayers like Avinu Malkeinu or daily slichot, without a sukkah, without a shofar, how do we continue to find the moments in which we can infuse holiness into our daily lives? So as busy and sometimes cumbersome the holidays, the food, the traditions, they hold us. It's almost as if during Tishrei we've been traveling on an ark together for 40 days and 40 nights. But now the calendar informs us, no more flood, no more traveling. It's time to get off that ark and begin, really start our journey. We have traversed the spiritual highs and lows, but now we are back to our regularly scheduled program. School and work, 3 meals a day, for some of us, 10,000 steps, finishing the emails, the errands, the laundry, the traffic. From what I just said, not all of it sounds particularly holy. But this is precisely the challenge that we've been waiting for. It's the challenge that the arc of the holidays has trained us for. It's easy to see holiness when there are thousands of people in the synagogue, when we are all dressed in white, or staring at the stars while eating in the sukkah. The hard work begins right now, finding the vital ways to connect to each other, to God, to ourselves, to the world around us. And while it may seem odd, we must exert the energy to find holiness in the details, even in carpool, at the basketball games, during school socials, during work conferences, during medical appointments. Holiness exists in every single aspect of this, if we are willing to make the time to look. The Jewish way is to remember and experience sanctity and the beauty of every day. Because, as we have seen most recently through the testimonies of the returned hostages, the simplicity of the everyday should never be taken for granted. Because I want you to leave this morning thinking about released hostage Ram Barslavsky. He returned alive just last week. After experiencing the horrors of the Hamas tunnels, he was underground for almost 2 years. And he had one request, one simple, profound, glorious request. His cousin said that Ram had asked for one thing, and that was to see the sky. That after all this time, he was locked up without a window. This was the first thing he wanted, and he wanted this on a daily basis. And in response to Ram's desire, people all over the world began looking up at the sky, and they took pictures and sent Ram their precious view of the heavens above. Now remember, what did Noah do when the waters diminished around the ark and the tops of the mountains became visible? Vayitach Noach et chalon hateva. Noah opened the window of the ark And one presumes that the first action that Noah takes is the same as Ram Barslavsky, that Noah looks up and sees the majesty of the sky, a clear view that Noah then and Ram now will never take for granted, and neither should we. There's a famous piece of Midrash that tells the story about the Hebrew slaves as they are walking through the miraculously split sea of reeds. And as they are prone to do, as we are prone to do, as they're walking along, the slaves begin to complain. We're told it's Reuven and Shimon, and they're bickering over the issue that their shoes are getting dirty from the mud that's accumulating at the bottom of the pathway. This is the greatest miracle in Jewish history, and they're complaining about the mud on their shoes. One says to the other, "Oi, my shoes! You know, my shoes were also dirty from the mortar in Egypt." And the other one says, "Oi, my shoes! My shoes are just disgusting. And you know what? They were also disgusting from the bricks in Egypt. And here, as we're walking along the bottom of the sea, nothing has changed." But Reuven and Shimon, they're not really different from many of us. At the greatest miracle in Jewish history, they could only look down at their shoes. They could only look at the mud in their lives. And because of that, they had no impetus to look around. They had no nudging to look upwards. They couldn't see the split waters or the open sky or the glory that God was providing. But we don't have to make the same mistake. Heshvan, this month is our spiritual nudge. It's our spiritual impetus to look out the window of our ark, to stare up at the sky. More than that, it's to get off the ark, to see and feel the miracle of being able to squeeze the hand of the loved one sitting next to us, to offer a compassionate glance at a parent who's dealing with a toddler, to invite a friend over for dinner, someone we know who could really use our warmth, our heart, to look around, to look up, to see ourselves as part of God's majestic painting and remember that it's precisely within the mundane details where we can truly find God's paintwork and God's paintbrush really adding so much color to our lives. A few days ago, the clergy received a beautiful note from an avid virtual follower, someone that watches our services from thousands of miles away. This is Aviva Radboard, so hello to Aviva. She is a Jewish woman in Pittsburgh, and she reminded us that this upcoming week, October 27th, marks the 7th anniversary of the Tree of Life shooting in Pennsylvania. On that fateful morning, Aviva reported to work at the local news station, something she had been doing for 40 plus years. And she heard the police scanner. And she realized, basically before anyone else, the horror that was taking place within her home synagogue in Pittsburgh. She personally knew some of the victims, and she explained that now, when we return the Torah to the ark, you have to remember the verses that we sing. It is a tree of life to those who hold fast to it. Its ways are pleasant, all its paths are peace. Turn us to you, O God, and we shall return. Renew us as in days of old. And she has realized that once she merely sang these words, like all of us, as a means of closing the Torah service. It felt mundane once to her. But now for Aviva, these verses are intimately part of her identity. Eitz Chaim Hi. She will never again hear those words, it's a tree of life, in an ordinary way. Because in just a flash, what we think of as routine, we know can change within seconds. Aviva wrote to us in hopes of our own realization of how blessed we are to infuse holiness into the many things, into the many moments that we often take for granted. It's in these regular days, these ordinary days, in which we too must grasp the beauty and the splendor and the wonder of this world that God gives us every single day. Each morning as we rise to take in a deep breath, we can choose to kvetch, to complain about the details of the day to come. Or we can choose to remember the refrain from returning the Torah, God, renew us. We need not only hear gut-wrenching messages from returned hostages or from news reporters from Tree of Life to remind us to stop looking at the mud on our shoes. And instead, daily, we can remind ourselves and share with each other just how blessed we are. So it's Heshvan. It's a month devoid of any holiday ritual. But just as Noah left the ark and began to plant, tilling the soil to start again, we too must leave the ark. We must get to work. Because this world is filled with holiness. It is filled with light. It is filled with awe and divine majesty. And we can choose to pause our habitual complaining about the metaphorical mud on our shoes, because there's very little engagement with the world that comes with only choosing to look downwards. And instead, we can realize there's so much more to see, and there's so much holiness to experience, when instead, we choose to look above. Shabbat Shalom.